inclusion in sports. And would each of y'all give your name, sports, and pronouns, and any affiliations or groups that you are representing, and what sports mean to you?
Great, I'll kick it off. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Mosier. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am a six-time member of Team USA in duathlon and triathlon and an Olympic trials competitor. I'm also a transgender man. I'm here representing myself, but also transathlete.com, which is the website that I founded that tracks trans-inclusive policies at various levels of play. And I'm really excited to have this conversation. And to eliminate any awkwardness, I'm just going to kick it over. Brooke, why don't you go next?
Thank you, Chris. My name is Brooke Rundle. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I identify as a cisgender lesbian woman. I am a NCAA or was an NCAA All-American volleyball player. I played professionally in Europe. And I'm the founder of Headstrong Mindset Training. It's an LGBTQ inclusive mindset coaching and consulting firm. And what sports means to me is playing sports it's a lifestyle. It's a way of life. It's shaped my identity. It's provided me a sense of purpose throughout my life. It's also given me some of the best friends that I've had throughout my life. I've met through sports. It's also provided me an opportunity to travel and see the world. So I just feel like sports are really it's fun and it's a healthy outlet and escape. So I firmly believe that everyone deserves the human right to play sports as the gender that they identify with. And I will kick it over to Cece.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Cece Telfer. I am the Division II National Champion for the Outdoors National Championship in the 400 hurdles. I'm currently an Olympic hopeful athlete looking to qualify for the 400 hurdles and represent Team USA and, different and unique individuals alike. I am an activist and I am looking to amplify the voices that needs to be heard. And here to make an imprint on the world.
Hi, my name's Lucy Hochstartner. That's the really long last name you can spell. I am an elite biathlete. That's cross-country skiing and target shooting. So kind of like duathlon, but different sports. People get them confused. And I also Nordic ski raced in college. So just cross-country skiing at the NCAA level. And I use she, hers pronouns. I identify as a cisgender straight athlete, and I'm representing myself, but just here to learn and speak as an ally and really support, again, the human right of everyone to play sports in the gender in which they identify and like whatever capacity fits best to them. And to me, sports means family. Like all of my best friends in the world have been met through sports, and it's just been an incredibly fulfilling experience. And as much as I'm like extremely competitive, I'm doing this at an elite level. I raced internationally this year representing the US. And it's great to get outside and be competitive, but above that, like my teammates are the people, if I have a hard time, like I could call any of them in the middle of the night, they'd pick up, but also the people that I just want to like share these awesome moments of joy doing, what we love.
That's awesome. There's definitely no guns in my sport, Lucy, but people often get our sports confused. It's true. Hey, Mac, why don't you introduce yourself? You did already? Give them a little bit more about you and what sport means to you.
I'll definitely give a little bit more. I go by he, him pronouns. My name is Mac Beggs. I am studying to be a gender therapist right now. I'm also training in Muay Thai, Jiu Jitsu, and kickboxing, hopefully to be the first trans man to enter the UFC. That's my plan in the making. And I also have recently retired from college wrestling, and what sports mean to me is that we have a safe place to be, especially when it comes to mental health. And I think it's just really important as a kid when you're growing up and you're going through these struggles, you don't really have an outlet. You can't really go to your family, you can't really go to your peers or anything like that. Sports is an outlet and is a safe place for you to go to. That's what sports means to me.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit why we're here. So like, why are we having this conversation about trans inclusion right now? I'll just set the stage a little bit for folks who are tuning in. We have a record number of anti-trans bills on the table right now in this legislative session in the United States. And many of them, over 50 of them, are targeting transgender student athletes. Just before this went live, Montana passed a bill to ban trans athletes from participating in sports in the gender with which they identify. They join multiple other states that have already passed bills, and over half the states in the country have had some sort of bill targeting transgender people in sports this year. So we are seeing a record number of these bills targeting athletes, and they're often linked with bills that would limit or ban healthcare for trans youth. And trans people in general. There's a bill right now in Arkansas that would ban trans people from having health insurance, would ban trans youth from receiving gender affirming care. And we know that sports is a lifeline as well. So, to ban trans people from sports in playing as their authentic self, takes away all of the good things that we just talked about from what we learn from sports, what we love about sports, that team environment, the family, the camaraderie, the unity that we feel, the friendships that we gain. When we're talking about high schoolers and even college athletes in sport, that's really the goal of sport, is to have that family, that community, and gain those values and skills that we learn and gain out of participating in sports. So we just thought it was a really pertinent time to have this conversation now about inclusion, about the state of affairs for trans folks, and about sort of how we've had our different experiences in sports, either as trans athletes or as allies. So I guess with that, kick it over to Mac. What do you think we should talk about first, Mac? What's on your blue computer?
I think we should talk about like how important it is to change the narrative and take it into into our hands of like how important it is to talk about this. I think just recently I was having a conversation on Facebook. I think last night, and I was just trying to get this conversation out and everything, and just talking about transgender people and trans athletes. And I think Facebook is having it to where they're setting an algorithm to where they're like, barring and like not getting those posts out for people to see. And so I think, just to continue talking about this, to keep pushing past those barriers is super important. And I'm going to pass it on to Brooke.
Yeah, I think taking control of that narrative and changing the narrative is so important. One of the stats that has just been really, I just can't get it out of my mind. I study and work in mental health and sports psychology is the Trevor Project. They recently did a survey in 2020 of over 40,000 LGBTQ youth, and 52% of transgender youth seriously considered attempting suicide in 2020. But what they also found is that having at least one gender affirming space can reduce that suicide rate by 25%. 25%. That safe space, it could be sports. It is sports for so many of us, and the idea that could be taken away is it's terrifying for me. So I just wish that we could really focus on what sports brings to people and really the importance of sports and the mental health aspect.
Yeah, Mac, I definitely have seen the same thing on other social media platforms that, I run transathlete.com. So my hashtag has always been transathlete, and those posts have been suppressed, and anything, pertaining to let trans kids play have also been suppressed. And it's disheartening. It's upsetting, because we know that there's a large concerted effort behind the attacks on trans people right now. This isn't just, this is not what the people in the States actually want. If we're being honest, what we're seeing is that lawmakers are giving slid copies of a bill that have been passed along to multiple states with the exact same text. It's coming from lobbying efforts from large groups, well-funded groups that hate trans people, that their sole purpose is to try to eliminate trans people from public view. And so when we talk about the sort of narrative around trans athletes, what we've seen is that the narrative is largely not positive unless we are telling our own stories. And when we have social media suppressing our ability to tell these stories, it's incredibly detrimental. To Brooke's point, when we have statistics like that, visibility is a powerful tool to allow people to see themselves, and that, hope for the future for a young trans person. Seeing somebody positively covered in the media, seeing an athlete being successful and able to compete in the gender with which they identify, and being accepted and loved and embraced by their teammates and their coaches, that has the power to also help save a young person's life. And so it's really upsetting that our messages aren't getting out there, to your point, Mac.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's just like heart-wrenching to know that, social media is supposed to be used as like an uplifting platform in a positive way. And it kind of sucks because, I mean, just on my own base theory of like, I feel like higher corporations and like the government is like really trying to like, really like stick it to like, like the smaller man. And I feel like, that's literally taking away from like people who want to have a voice and who do have a voice. And I think that's just extremely detrimental. And it really just falls under the like line what Brooke was saying is like, if you take away the narrative of what we're trying to say, how are these kids going to be able to, like cope or like have the resources in order to cope and how to cope when these situations come into play? Because Chris, how many states currently right now are have these anti-trans bills in place? It's 33, correct?
30 of them have had bills and several of them have passed now. Yeah. So over half the states in our country are targeting one of the most vulnerable populations of people in the world, which is young transgender people. It's really upsetting. I think when I'm thinking about like, talking about representation in media, I'm really interested in two different areas. So one is, Cece and I talk about this all the time about how the differences between the way that I was covered and am covered, even as an out trans man who is white, who is on Team USA competing at the highest level of my sport, versus how Cece has been covered in the media as an Olympic hopeful, as a Black trans woman. And so, I think it's, and, Mac, I think also your story in Changing the Game documentary, if anybody hasn't seen Changing the Game, definitely should check it out. Mac is featured prominently in that film, and we see a lot of your journey and the media coverage that happened for you in high school. So I think that there are a lot of differences in the way that we've been covered. Cece, I'm interested to hear your perspective on like representation, on the media, and just your experience in kind of coping and dealing with that as an athlete and as a person.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you so much for this opportunity and for being here. Thank you guys so much for having me. Also, definitely, as an out trans woman, as a out Black trans woman in the sports field, it feels like I'm always like struggling in the sense of like to find resources and to find like the opportunity to get a chance. It feels like I'm like they want to see me fail. Like that's what I feel like. I feel like people want to see me fail, and that just makes me want to go even harder. But I feel like if personally speaking, seeing how the situation goes, it's different definitely between the sexes and the races of how opportunity are just in terms of like opportunity presentation. So I feel like a lot more opportunity would have been presented to me had I not been an out trans woman, and I would have just quote unquote just sucked it up and deny, and faked my whole life and just gone with the flow, as opposed to who I am now, living my life, living my truth, living as my authentic self. I feel like it's so much harder to find, especially a coach that is willing to, take that challenge and that chance and that I know that I'm a walking controversy is what I say, but like I feel like a lot of people are not apt to do that and take that on. And I have to, at some point of my life, it sucks to say that I have to accept it, but that's what it is. I know that my college coach went through a lot when he did choose to take that step in supporting me unconditionally and loving me unconditionally, which means even when he heard his friends saying things that were off, to really like correct them, and if they choose not to take the further steps into, like changing their language and really trying to understand the athlete and the person as a human being, then he had to cut those people out. I know that there's a lot of like stuff like that. Like people who really support and love me unconditionally, like my coach in college, like had to go through a lot too. And like his family was being threatened as well. And like he was being threatened, his life was being threatened. So like he took a leap of faith and you know, he saw everything that individuals like myself went through from a firsthand standpoint, and like being a coach and like looking back at his own life and his kids. He has 3 daughters and a son, and he's like he would never want to see anybody treat his daughters like this. If anything, he would want somebody to protect his daughter and like have the opportunity and that chance, being my coach, being the person that I travel with, being the person that enters my meets, being the person that I am representing a university and a body. He took that chance to like, you know, be that coaching figure and intertwining that father figure, and really just like choose to educate and take that initial step in like practicing what he preaches, which is, you know, authenticity and just like trusting your coach and trusting what your coach is saying. And he took that into himself. That was a challenge for him too. So it was a lot going through that, and I'm so grateful that I had a team and a coach like that to really pave that way of like protection and uncertainty of what this life that I'm choosing to go down would be like. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so fortunate that I had that strong, and I had those teammates and that chance that they have given me to, you know, really see me as a good person first in order to judge me, and like not even judge me, but in order to just like they see me as a human being, and that's what all that matters, and they know that I'm a good person. So that was just like the icing on the cake, you know. So that was very strong, but the struggle is real because COVID took away like sponsorship opportunities for me, looking to from 2019 going into 2020, which was the year of the Olympics, and that was just all snatched away because I was looking to, you know, compete in 2019 leading up to the 2020 Olympics, and be on the lookout, be on everybody's radar, and to like get the opportunity for sponsorships and endorsements to see what I can do and see who I am as an athlete, especially competing on the professional stage with other women like myself, in the professional aspect and competitive aspect, to see what I can do against these other women. You know, now I feel like all these opportunities are like snatched away from me. I've reached out to tons of coaches, over 200 plus coaches for help, and like, you know what, I need help. I don't have a training facility. I'm in New England. Like when the snow hits, that's all my self like resources that I can, you know, go out and still get a training in, which is like open tracks that are near me, like high school tracks, whatever I can get a hand of, like are all gone once the snow hits. So, and no, the fact that nobody reached out or like to give me like, I'm trying not to take it personal, but like none of my emails, like 9 out of those 200 emails that I sent like bounced back, and it was just like one out of the, you know what I'm saying, like none of them basically bounced back, and it was just like somebody could have just reached out and let me know. So it feels like I'm constantly struggling to take this journey on by myself, but I know what I'm capable of and I know what I'm doing, as long as I'm following the hormonal guidelines for the IOC and I'm crossing all my T's and dotting all my I's and really focusing on my health and strength. I know that I can do it, even if I'm going to do it alone. I'm a person of faith, sort of like God is with me, so I'm not truly alone. So I just got to keep pushing is what I'm telling myself, because the opportunity and the privileges are like different. Like, and I'm starting to feel it, and I'm starting to see it, no matter how.
Yes, you seem to be saying like that relationship with that coach and athlete relationship is really important, and especially I had kind of like a similar experience when I was like being recruited for college. It was very hard to find a coach that was willing to take on a trans man for wrestling. I mean, in wrestling, it's hard in general to try to get a scholarship, let alone get on a team. And luckily, I was able to have connections. Not exactly how I wanted to go about the right way, but it's just like you just got to keep reaching out and reaching out and reaching out. And it just seems like just for like trans athletes, we're having to take that extra step and that extra intuitive and extra initiative in order to try to secure, like our future for us in order to be in sports. And Chris, I don't know how it was, for you and your journey.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had a similar experience. I had coaches tell me that I was a liability, that they couldn't be affiliated with me because what would it mean if they had a trans person as one of their athletes? And you have to think too, I came out in 2010. So this was, many years ago. I had a major sports nutrition company tell me that they couldn't have me featured in their ads because what would it say about their company if they were affiliated with someone like me? So, it was heartbreaking to hear all of those things. And then we see also then the way things evolve, right? In 2016, I got sponsored by Nike and was the first trans athlete to be sponsored by a major sports company. I'm still signed with them, for another at least 2 years, my contract goes. I just did something with Gatorade. So I feel like, there are opportunities, there are companies that are looking to step up and support trans athletes. I guess the thing is that we need to see it year round, and we need to see it not just in June, right? Not just around Trans Day of Visibility, not just when it's Pride Month, not just on our major moments that we mark throughout the calendar year, but really that year-round annual support of trans athletes as athletes. And I think that's the most important part. Again, it kind of goes back to that media piece of losing the humanity of a person. I'm just kind of curious as I was thinking about that, Brooke and Lucy, what has been your sort of perception seeing, in the last, I would say, the last 4 years were rough for the LGBTQ community, but in the last, I'd say, year, the number of anti-trans articles and sort of right-leaning perspectives that are sharing myths and misconceptions in the media has gone sky high. And, of the trans, of all trans content in right-leaning media sources, nearly 50% of it is about transgender athletes, which is a disproportionate amount, like considering all the other amazing things that trans people do in the world and how few athletes there are. That seemed to be the hot button clickbait, sort of thing that was being posted. So I'm curious from your perspective, like I think for the three of us, for CC Mack and myself, like living in it, it hurts every single day. It sucks to read these headlines. It hurts to hear people talk about us in a certain way. But I'm curious, what is your perspective as an outsider from that, as an ally? Like, what have you been reading about us? If you didn't know about the community, what would be your perceptions? And how can we combat that? Like, how can you help other allies sort of put this into perspective?
Yeah, for sure. This is something I wanted to talk about because certainly it was like a journey for myself growing up as a cisgender straight woman. Like, I at first only had the media perspective, and I remember being in high school. So I graduated in high school in 2016. So it, from 2013 to 2016, like that was when I was first getting into more serious sports. And at the time, like where I most remember reading about in the media was the first time I ever remember hearing about like this idea that you could be barred from sports wasn't even with a trans woman. I ran track and I was following Caster Semenya's story. And so it was just really like at the time, it was all fear mongering of like this idea that like people were going to come and take women's sports. And that was something that was and still is really potent. And so I think to get past that, like it's a matter of meeting more people and talking to more people and like finding and seeking out those other perspectives. And so like to get that, I had to seek it out. And so it's sad to me that if you were someone who either didn't know or like weren't seeking it out and could be easily swayed, when you focus so much, like the media focuses so much on this idea of like just reducing things to science and like amounts of testosterone and things like that, that makes it seem really clear cut and like that it's just, which it's not. And so like the more I think that we can focus on, and you've said this before, and I've heard you say it, but like actual people's stories and how sports should be an inclusive environment. And it's not really about like these you know, testing millimoles of something, you know. It's about having fun for kids. And that was something that, like, certainly I had to learn throughout high school, because when it's all you're hearing in the media, you're like, oh man, they really are gonna, like, I'm not gonna be able to play sports anymore. And it's like this crazy idea that's really just not true at all. And so, yeah, I think the most important thing is to just like focus on people's stories, and the idea, I think also exactly what you said, that the thing that was instrumental for me was, like, I studied political science in college, and this idea that it is just a concerted movement, not about sports at all, and it's about hating trans people. And that's visible in all the legislatures. Like, these bills are passing with other bills that are about hating trans people that have nothing to do with sports. Like the bill that was passed in Montana, it was like a guy who was a guy not involved in women's sports, and he was sponsoring it. And his next bill was to deny healthcare to trans youth. Like, it wasn't about sports, and they're never about sports. And when you actually ask the female athletes, like, we had hundreds of people sign letters and testify against that bill, all of whom were female athletes. And they were like, yeah, but, like, we know we're saving the women's sports. And we're just like, well, no, you're not. So yeah, I think, yeah, my main thing, I guess, would be to focus on the fact that it's not really about sports, and that we have amazing trans people already competing in sports, and, like, there's nothing wrong. Like, I don't know, Brooke, you have stuff to add.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it seems like this is all because it's all happening so quickly. I mean, this has been, trans athletes have been targeted for a long time, but just since January now, we've been seeing this wave of bills pass. And so because it's getting so much media attention, I think a lot of people misunderstand it as, oh, suddenly we're allowing trans athletes to compete, which is that's not true. I mean, like, as I've learned from you, Chris, you know, the IOC has allowed transgender athletes compete in the Olympic Games since 2003, and in the NCAA since 2011. And so that tells me that there is no evidence that trans athletes are a threat to women's sports. I mean, it's just an irrational, and it's not based on facts. And one of the things that's really bothering me the most right now is the fact that women's sports and cisgender women in particular it's infuriating, and it's horrifying that I feel like I'm being weaponized against my own community, against my own teammates, and against my own LGBTQ community. And when it really comes down to, for me, is look, it's transgender girls are girls, transgender women are women. And when you attack transgender girls and women's, you are attacking women's sports. You're not protecting women's sports, you're attacking them. And so the real threat to women's sports is not transgender people. It's not transgender athletes. It's unequal pay, unequal resources. It's the mental, physical, and sexual harassment. It's the disproportionate number of male head coaches in the NCAA. I mean, the list goes on, and I won't make it about women's sports because that's not what these bills are about. So let's, you know, but that's how I feel about it. And
Brooke, let's capture that. Like everybody.
Sorry, I get a little fired up.
It's
about
exactly
this topic.
how I feel. And yeah, I like felt the same way when Montana initially introduced this bill. I was like racing in Poland, and I was just like so angry. I was like, this is not, I was like rage typing on my computer, like talking to my roommate. I was like, do you even understand? Like, it's not about women's sports. Like, they have problems, and it's not this. And yeah, so I think it's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you two brought that up, because you mentioned saving women's sports a number of times, and really, like, that phrasing is so incredibly important, because literally these bills are being packaged as the Save Women's Sports bill. And so talk about weaponization. Like, you know, I was just laughing as we were all talking, because I was like, every single one of us on here has played women's sports. Like, women's sports is deeply important to all of us on this call right now. You know, like, it's just like, I mean, I grew up playing girls and women's sports, even though I didn't identify as a girl or a woman. I didn't know my identity, but like it was foundational. It is so integral in who I am. And there, you know, by allowing, you know, trans people to participate in sports, which we have been, as Brooke mentioned, for decades, you know, there's no threat to women, to cis women, in having us participate. And so, you know, it's just ludicrous that this has been the package, and you know, interesting that more cis women haven't been as outraged as the two of you are to be used as pawns in this political game.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that like people don't necessarily, because trans people can be so isolated as a group and not seen, like they don't necessarily know. So like I wrote an open letter in Montana against this bill, and when it like got out to people, I had 100 women athletes being like, yeah, this is ridiculous, but they just had no idea it was even happening. But yeah, I don't think people like to be like, it doesn't feel good to be used. It's obviously not as detrimental as being, you know, actually prevented from playing sports. Like that's obviously the people who are most affected. But yeah, like women's sports also have problems. And so the legislatures are essentially just trying to pit two marginalized groups against each other, which is just such a classic way to like maintain and hold power. It's almost comical. It's like, I see what you're doing. Like it's not smart.
So well said.
And hopefully this is just a big call to action for more cis people to get involved in this, because it is so urgent. And I just wanted to give another shout out to Chris's website, transathlete.com. The /take-action page that you have on your site, Chris, is been the most informative, most updated. I mean, I'm amazed. I refresh that thing almost every day and it changes. I don't know how you keep it up to date. But even for someone like me who is still catching up and still a little bit new, it's just a great resource to go to. You can get caught up immediately, and the action plan is right there. You can find your state, and it's really detailed and clear and concise. And you can spend some time getting more politically involved. It lays it out very clearly. So I would really encourage anyone who's listening to go check out that page on transathlete.com, take/action.
Yeah, and it's super easy to follow. Chris gives it step by step on how to be able to attack these bills. And a lot of these bills are using information that's used back from like 1990s to 2012, 2011, and it's just all misogynist thinking. And you know, we just have to, you know, take this with the next generation and take it head on. We have the power to do it. We've always had the power to do it, and we can't let them take our voices at all whatsoever.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. You know, I detail on that website various levels of play for sports policy, and you know, one of the most popular, specifically right now, is the K through 12 page, which is actually high school sports. There's a patchwork of policies that exist right now in high school sports, and it's different when you move to college sports. So, you know, a person may have a high schooler may have a very good experience in, say, California or Massachusetts, but then have a, you know, if they move states, have a horrible time as a trans athlete, not be able to play in a state like Texas or in Indiana or other states in the country. And there's a variety. So we have really good states that allow you just to participate based on who you know that you are, with no hoops to jump through. We have states like, you know, max experience in Texas, and then, you know, the whole invasive disclosures, medical interventions necessary in order to participate. When we get to the college level, there's set rules in place for the NCAA, which actually is a guideline which governs their championships. But every single state is allowed to create their own policies, and every single school is allowed to create their own policies at the college level. So again, we see different policies in place at those schools. So, you know, when a school has a trans athlete, like, you know, when Cece was in college, had the whole experience of having to fight for her rights in order to be able to participate. And Cece, maybe you can talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But then there's even a different layer of policies when we get to the pro leagues, right? So when we get to professional sports leagues, when we get to national governing bodies, and when we get to the International Olympic Committee or any of the events that they govern, which was how I ended up challenging and changing the policy in 2015 for the IOC, because I, as a duathlete, even though duathlon is not part of the Olympics, it's still governed by the IOC rules for the World Championships. And so I challenged that policy in order to participate and got it changed ultimately at the end of 2015. So we have just like this huge range of policies. And what we need to keep in mind is what is important about participating in sports at various levels. So you really can't compare the policies that Cece and I and Lucy would be, governed under for the elite levels of world competition, potential Olympic trials and Olympic hopefuls. Those policies are very different than the policies that we should be having for people in high school, right? A 14-year-old should not be subjected to the same policies as me, in the Olympic trials. And that's just what we need to keep in mind. To Mac's point, we've often seen like some of the research, the studies that people are using in these legislation, in these bills and in the legislative hearings is actually not about athletes at all. Like when we get down to it, there are very few studies that have been done, and not comprehensive studies that have been done on transgender athletes in terms of performance and performance outcomes through transition. And also important to note that there are various ways to transition. There's not just one way to be a trans person. So a trans person like me may take medical intervention, hormone treatment. Other trans folks don't. And so the policies can be different there as well. So with all that said, there's not just one, blanket policy that we can say like, this is the best practice, right? Because the goals of sport are different at different levels. We can be clear about at the high school level, every young athlete should have the opportunity to participate in sports in the gender with which they identify, period. I think that is an easy blanket policy to say. I have a model policy on my website actually for that. And then we see that things get different and change. Policy should be more inclusive. And I think, our world would be a lot better if we started looking at how to include people as opposed to how to exclude them and keep them out and discriminate against them, which is what all of this legislation that we're seeing right now is about. That was just a lot of level setting to get us to this idea that, the policies are all over the place right now. These bills are happening in states that have bad policies, states that have great policies, states that have no policies in existence right now. It's just happening depending on which conservative lawmaker will take the bait for it. And then, different policies at college. So with all of that said, Cece, I'm really curious about your college experience in terms of policy. Did they have a policy when you came out? Did you have to work for and fight for that policy? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so thank you so much for asking that question, Chris. And everything that you said, you were just talking about 100% true, 100% valid. So the policy for my university, I know that once they had a no discrimination policy, and then they had a the policy backing transgender athletes like myself. They made sure that that was apparent when the LGBTQ groups were formed on campus, like the clubs that were formed. I know that the captain of the club went to the NCAA rep and spoke to them about it, and then that's when the policy was initiated. And then when I came out, my coach mentioned the policy to me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh! Like, are you serious? That's crazy that they're like this is happening." Like I said, in that moment, a lot of stuff that was going on, but I was basically, he knew that I was protected. He knew that like if anything happened, like there would be protection for these athletes, regardless of what was happening. So they initially already had that, which was awesome, which was amazing. So when I heard that, when he was talking to me, I know I was pretty much like I was just in shock. So a lot of the stuff, a lot of emotion was going on. So like to know that I was like protection is the number one thing on my mind, on our mind, as an athlete in the sport, or as a trans athlete, as a transgender individual, as a transgender person, transgender folks in general, LGBTQ members in general, safety is number one for us. So to know that like my university had me, and when he explained the NCAA policy and rules and regulations, like that was just phenomenal as well. Like he was just like, don't worry, like you're protected. All you need to worry about is just, all you need to be focused on is just competing and as an athlete. So it took me a while to like, believe that kind of aspect, because I knew what I was doing and knew the career I was in and what the backlash would be, because they had their policies, they had their rules that had a guideline for situations that would occur, like myself, like being a competitive collegiate athlete. They crossed their T's and they dot their I's, you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, when people were coming for them on Twitter and Instagram and all over, like they literally were like, this is the policy, like this is the rules, like I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like they stood by what they were saying. And that's what I'm saying when we revert back to loving people and supporting a group and supporting people unconditionally. Like the NCAA was like, we have our rules. The rules are being followed. Where is the problem? I don't see it. So like that was just the icing on the cake. And I have to commend the NCAA for doing that, because they back themselves up and they still in return protected athletes like us. And more so gave us the opportunity to be an athlete and give us the opportunity to compete and give us the opportunity to be a part of the teams that we are meant to be a part of. So I 100% I thank them so much for that, and thank them for standing their ground and not to take any BS from anybody, because they did what they were supposed to do and the rules were followed, period, point blank. Let's move on. So yeah.
I love that. I will also say, I think that the NCAA can do more right now. I do believe that they will not hold championships in states that have these bans, because it is contrary to their policy. But wow, would it be substantial if they could actually make a statement that says that they would do that? Bills are passing
Absolutely.
every single day, and every single day that they are silent and not forthright about their intent to pull championships from these states gives the governors that much more power to think that they will not suffer the loss of economic impact, that they will not lose those very important games and championship events. And, by that sort of silence, even though I'm so,
Right.
so thrilled like that you've had a great experience with them. And I know that
Yeah.
they are investing in learning more about this. They've held a summit. They had, they have research that's going on. They are invested in figuring out, what is the best course of action for their policy to continue to take. But wow, the power of an organization like that to speak out about this, state of events right now would be substantial if they would make a statement.
Yeah,
And
I just think
and I feel like.
Go ahead, Cece.
Yeah, no, sorry, absolutely. I was just completely agreeing with what Chris was saying, and I was also adding to the fact that this is where allyship comes into play. Like the NCAA said, they're supporting trans athletes and they're supporting them unconditionally. Like, speak up. Like, you have a voice, you have a platform, a plethora of people. You have the NCAA Division 1 and 3. You have a bunch of different, you have a voice, like a huge voice that can stop bullying, you can stop the hate. Like, and this is where the allyship comes into play. And this is what I wanted to commend and comment on what was Chris was saying. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that of whether we like it or not, sports are being drawn into this by conservative legislators. And so the silence is complicity. And that was all of the groups that testified against that Montana law. I was on the little Zoom testimony is how they're doing it these days. So I was listening, and all of them were trying to make that case to legislators that even though they might hate trans people, perhaps you could appeal to them on an economic level. And it's terrible that that's the route that we had to take, but it would have been so powerful to be able to say this will happen. Whereas all of the testimony had to be there is indication that the NCAA will, or the NCAA has in the past. And I was just come on, guys.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks how I was just told, I didn't know that my name was being brought up in some of these arguments in the legislation. And the thing is that when the narrative was being taken from me, it was just the fact that, oh, Mac Beggs is on testosterone. yes, I was on testosterone and I was, transitioning because I'm a trans man, that I'm not going to stop living in my truth because you don't understand what a transgender person is. And so like, it was just like really heart wrenching. And it's just like, you don't know what I had to go through. You don't know that UIL already had to, was already regulating me, already taking my blood work, already getting all this medical information that was completely intrusive. And it's just like really heart wrenching to know that, they're not telling the full story on what is happening.
Yeah, I'm curious for Chris and Mac and Cece, like as we're talking about these different levels of policy, do you all have experience competing in multiple levels of athletics as a trans person, and have you had to navigate like changing and different policies, like as a straight athlete? That just, I can imagine that being so incredibly exhausting. And I think that's the other thing that gets taken away, is like all the conversation is around what advantages trans athletes may have. And like in my mind, like it's not an advantage. You have so much extra baggage that you have to deal, like constantly getting hate, like that's not conducive to making you fast or anything. And I'm just trying to like, what does that process look like, and how has that affected your, life and training? And
I know, like, just for me and my family, especially my grandmother, we call her Granny Beggs, the famous known Granny Beggs. A wonderful woman. I don't know what I would do without her. She absolutely shielded me from everything that was happening in order for me to focus on just the state championship, because I competed against women all my life. I did softball, I did t-ball, I did pole vault, soccer, like you name it, I was in it. I did basketball, I was on 18 basketball. Like I was already an elite athlete already. Just because like, sports was my outlet. Like that was something that I wanted to do. Like that was how I got, I had a lot of anger issues. I had a lot of mental health issues. It was just something that I could, put myself in. And that was like, I stepped beyond that line on the field or on the court, and I left everything else behind. And so like when it came down to, for instance, like at the junior high level, I asked, to play on the football team, just even play, like to be against the guys on the football team. And like the guys were always like, we would be playing it like at recess or something, and they're like, yo, Mac, you gotta play it, man. Like you gotta like, push for this. And like, so I asked the coach for like 2-3 years in a row, if I could play on the football team. He told me no. And I was just like, what the heck, dude? I was like, I could be your best wide receiver right now. Like, and like he just wouldn't let me. And so then I came to my 9th grade year. That's when I found wrestling. And I was like, you know what? I'm tired of like, dribbling a ball. I'm tired of like hitting a ball. I just want to like throw people. I'm like, I gotta like find a new outlet. And I still had to compete against women. Because the high school, policy was like for UIL and wrestling was whatever you identify as, whatever your gender was as you were born as, and on your birth certificate, that's what you had to compete as, not what you identify as. And I was like, oh God, I was like, I had to go through this all in high school. Are you kidding me? And then I didn't even know at the college or at the Olympic level that you could even compete as a transgender person and a trans athlete as what you identify as. So I think like a lot of like, getting this out is also getting information out to like those young individuals who don't know that these policies are in place at the college level and at the Olympic level. And so like in high school, I feel like a lot of these stigmas and like to where, these policies are attacking trans individuals are starting at the youth level and in high school, because, it's like telling them, oh, well, you're not going to be able to even live in your truth until like, you're already at a certain age to where you're like 18, 19 years old, and then you're having to play catch up. And that was honestly the hardest thing when I got to the college level and I had to compete against guys. And I already compete against guys like, in the practice room and, during the summertime in high school, but it just wasn't the same, all year round. Like, training is important, and then competition wise is important when it comes to that. So when I got to the college level, I got a huge eye opener when I was going up against these, young men that, already had, testosterone levels that were at the age that they, were at. And then I was like, 19, 20 years old, and I had the testosterone levels of like a 14-year-old. So I had to play catch up with, I had to talk to my doctor, and was like, I gotta I gotta get with it now. Like I can't, set myself back anymore. And so once I was done with, female wrestling females in high school and competing against females in high school, I then had to change the narrative for myself. Like, okay, well now I can finally fully live in my truth.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Mac. And I think it's super important to say, like, what makes you a great athlete isn't the amount of testosterone in your body. It's your work ethic, it's your mindset, it's your dedication, your grit. Like anybody who watches that opening scene of Changing the Game, like, like you with the ropes and like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
dude,
Like,
I was like training for like 5-6 hours a day, like PTSD from like, my coach would be like, Mac, I'll be like, huh, like it's PTSD, bro.
but listen, like, this is what people don't talk about, right? Like nobody's talking about CC's training, about waking up, putting the miles in, doing the drills, doing the recovery. Like nobody's talking about how many hours a week I train and what my mindset is and what my effort levels are. It's just like, oh, you're taking testosterone, you must have an advantage. And we know that's not true. There are, first of all, testosterone is in every person's body, right? So it's a healthy part of all of our hormonal function. But there are plenty of folks who were assigned male at birth who have high levels of testosterone who are horrible at sports. So like, it's just one of these sexist assumptions, these myths and misconceptions to say, that everyone who has testosterone in their body at a higher level could just roll off the couch and make it on Team USA, and it's just false. So I think that's really important to point that out. And like, certainly part of your story, and probably a part of mine, is also the way that we're spoken to and treated when we're younger athletes who are girls or women, or perceived to be girls or women, right? So like, Brooke and Lucy, I don't know if this was your experience too, but like when I was a young athlete playing on girls teams, I saw a very clear difference between the way that I was spoken to by coaches versus the way that my brother was spoken to by coaches. So my brother was supposed to be fast and aggressive and strong and run through first base and don't give up and be competitive. And I was told, like, even though I was all of those things, and I was a sibling rivalry too, but like, I was told like to participate and have fun. And like, if you get dirty, it's okay, but you can clean off. Like, it was just like I was a very light touch by comparison to the way that boys and young men were spoken to. And that has an absolute impact on the way that we think that we should show up in sports. And so I think like one of the most, and Brooke, you can probably talk about mindset here and like dive a little more into this, but I think one of the most amazing things is just like, how those messages actually do impact us. So like they put limiting beliefs on how good a female athlete can be before she's no longer female, or before, like people will question her gender identity or her gender in general. So like, that's just been an interesting component of all of this. And specifically as a trans man, it's a very different experience than trans women in sports.
I think that's such a great point, Chris. I mean, we have to look at sports and recognize that sport is really one of the last institutions that's still separated by a gender binary. And that really is the crux of it all. I mean, that the messaging that athletes receive about their gender, about their sexual orientation, about gender identity, about race, all of that impacts confidence. I mean, one of the things that I am dealing with and working with the most is just is internalized homophobia and how that impacts athletes, not just mentally, but physically, and the retention rate as well. And then also, just their performance and how it also impacts team cohesion. I mean, it's all related, and it's such an important conversation, and it all comes back to, to mental health. Matt, I was so glad to hear you talk about how your mental health changed so significantly when you were able to compete as the gender you identify with. And I would just love to hear more about that, because that's the good part of the story, right? And that's what we want to be promoting, and that's what we want to be protecting. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, part of my story that nobody knows about is that actually the female wrestler coaches actually tried to recruit me on their team initially, which was like, my coach were like, no, I don't think so. This doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound like it would even go good in general. So that's when I reached out to my coach, like my coach, Coach Omi Costa, which phenomenal, amazing head coach. So hands down, like awesome. I love him. He's done such an amazing thing with the program and making inclusion for me and making the wrestling room a safe place for me. And I mean, I had like, a couple like spats with some dudes that like, didn't understand, but like I was just like, you know what, bro, I'm trying to win a championship here. If you ain't with it, kick rocks. Like I don't care what you think of me. Like, if I have to wrestle against you, like, I'm just gonna tell you that my coach is on my side. So like, go ahead and come at me, bro. Like I'm still gonna try to like win a championship. And I think it's just very important to like, be able to have those resources and have those people behind you. And it definitely helps with mental health. And I think it's also very important to have resources in place, to have a safe place and to have, counselors on standby, especially, for trans individuals in sports. I think it's very important, and of the LGBT community in general that are in sports. For anybody, let's just God points to that. Like mental health is important in general for everyone.
I think you're going to make a great one, Mac. One thing I want to say that just broke my heart earlier, Cece, hearing you say that you felt like so many people were rooting against you. And I just want to, and I know we're running out of time here, I just want you to hear me say that I'm rooting for you. And I know that hopefully a lot of people listening to this are going to be rooting for you as you approach preparation for the Olympics. Good luck with that. And just, I know we're running out of time. So what else can we do to help support you all in your journey and opposition to these bills?
Definitely change the narrative. Being behind us 100%, making sure that, we're talking about these things. Chris has an amazing platform right now in order to be able to, address these discussions and topics and these anti-trans bills. And we are running out of time. And I just want to thank Chris. I want to thank Brooke. I want to thank Lucy. I want to thank Cece. I want to thank Cece for coming on. Thank you so much for joining this conversation and listening. Y'all are all incredible role models and advocates, and I'm so glad to be part of this. And thank you for Sports Equality Foundation for putting this together. This has been super important. And whoever is listening, thank you for watching. It is super important to us and the trans community. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much. I'm also rooting for everyone on this call. I'm just like so starstruck. I'm like, oh my gosh, amazing.
It's been a real honor to be here with you all. Thank you for including me. And yeah, I think it's pretty clear, transgender youth are under attack right now. And if you really care about the lives of transgender youth, we have to stop these bills. We have to oppose them. It's really urgent. Can't stress that enough. And so big call to action for more people to get involved.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you guys so much for having me also a part of this talk. This chat is a very important topic. Everything that we spoke about today really needs to be mentioned and really needs to be talked about so that people know that the conversation is on and we should be talking about it everywhere. And I know that Chris is a huge inspiration for me as an athlete and as a person, as an activist. Going on his social media and looking at the things that he's posting has kept me up to date. So that's a huge resource. And I just beg and plead that we should create an equal resource option for everybody. Which is a huge thing that was like the opener of this conversation that I didn't know that we were talking about. That was not even intended to say, but like, just like equal opportunity in sports wasn't equal opportunity for all of us. And now those people, individuals, are saying that they are for women are ended up being against women because it's kind of sickening, or I'm sorry, it is sickening to know that somebody can say that person is transgender and then for the institution to subject them to an examination. That's crazy. That's mind-blowing. That's traumatic. So I just think that we should always definitely try to stay up to date on what is going on, and people who don't have that voice, that privilege, that opportunity to have that privilege of not feeling like they are an oppressed group, to just go out of their comfort zone and just take the opportunity to help those individuals who are being oppressed, who don't have that privilege, who don't have that voice. And just like, even if it takes like standing up to somebody who's not educated on the topic, just be like, hey, like, one thing you can do is like Google it, just Google it. Like, certain things you just Google it. Like, it's not that we use Google 24/7, like, just Google it, like, you know. And then like when you have that opportunity to go to that person and like really like get your like questions out, like that's your moment to do it. And you can always do it in a nice way and really like express your allyship and standing up what you think for what you think is what you know is true, what should be true, what is moral, and you know, like supporting us unconditionally, and definitely offering equal resources. I am for equal resources. So
Excellent. I'll land this plane. So thanks so much, everybody, for joining. Thanks for watching in the replay. We'll make sure that we have all of the social media handles to follow all of our incredible panelists. And again, please go to transathlete.com/take-action to learn about all of these anti-trans bills that are sweeping the nation and unfortunately passing, and how you can take action against them. Never underestimate your ability to make change by using your voice. It's the ripple effect. You having these conversations with the people around you will ripple out into your friends, into your workplace, into your sports teams, into your communities. And that is how we make change. Your voice matters, and we need allies on our side right now more than ever. So whether you identify as cis and straight or a part of the LGBTQ community, we need everybody to join in this fight against these bad bills targeting transgender athletes and transgender youth. So again, thanks for joining, and we will say goodbye now. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
That was awesome, you guys.
That was awesome. That was amazing. That was. Oh, we killed it, guys! Oh, we really think I did. Ooh.
Kirk's on mute, just motioning wildly. We didn't talk about how to end, and so Cece just jumped right off. We're still recording, so hopefully not still recording and streaming.
I ended the recording on mine.
Okay, cool.
It was great, and thank you guys all so much. Incredible, really. I can't wait for us to get this out even on a broader stage. The conversation was incredible. So thank you all. Awesome. I can't emphasize enough. If there's anything else we need, don't hesitate to reach out. Obviously with Sports Equality Foundation, with the TikTok, we are trying to do as much as we can. And like I said, you know, I just through the moon. This is amazing. So hopefully we can continue to keep kind of breaking down some barriers here and get some of these bills off the tables and turned back.
Yeah,
thank
awesome.
you so much, Kurt. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I've got to jump, but Brooke and Lucy, thank you so much for your allyship and being a part of this. I think your voices are so incredibly important as a part of this conversation. The stuff about being weaponized, just like that's what people need to hear. So I'm just so grateful. Mac, love you, buddy. Good to see you.
All right.
Thank
Kurt.
you.
Nice
Thank you all so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.